In this lesson, we're going to talk about intervals. An interval is just a distance between any two given notes. Now, intervals can occur linearly, as you see right here, or they can happen vertically, as I've just demonstrated here by making a chord. Okay, now the way we identify intervals in these two ways is exactly the same. Learning how to identify intervals quickly is a really great step in developing your own performance technique, because it will certainly help you to read the music better, and for singers will help kind of make that connection with solfege. For instrumentalists, it'll help you in sight reading. And additionally, learning to identify intervals quickly will help you play better in tune, because you'll know the relationship that your line has with the rest of the piece, and more specifically with the key that you're playing in. Now, counting intervals can be easily explained as just by counting up from the note that you're starting on. Okay, so if the two notes are the same in the same octave, that's called a unison. If we move up one, that's a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh. When we get to 8, it becomes an octave. And you can count as high as you could ever imagine. Jazz harmonies and jazz chords utilize ninths, 11ths, and 13ths, but most of the harmonies that we will deal with will stop you at an 8th or an octave. Now, it's important to note that when counting intervals, you count the first note as 1. So if we adjust it like so, C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4. This is called a fourth. Okay. Now, when you identify intervals, there are two parts. There's the steps away from each other, what we've just described, and then there's the quality of the interval. For this lesson, we'll be learning about major intervals, minor intervals, and perfect intervals. Okay, and we're going to learn a few terms to describe these intervals. The first term is called diatonic. Now, diatonic intervals occur naturally within a given key signature. So if you look at the screen here, we have C major. In C major, the relationship between C and E diatonically is called a major third. Okay? C and D would be a major second. C and A would be a major sixth. And C and B would be a major seventh. Again, these are so-called major intervals because they are diatonic or occur naturally within this key. Now, if we were to alter these intervals, we could make them minor. And the way we do that is by simply taking any major interval and lowering it a half step. So from C to B flat is a minor seventh. C to E is a major seventh, but if we flat it, lower it one half step, it becomes a minor seventh. Now, these two intervals are called chromatic intervals because they are created with notes outside of the key signature. Now, it's important to note that minor intervals can be diatonic if you're in a minor key. Okay, so if we're in A minor, which would have the same key signature as C major, the relationship between A and C is that of a minor third. Now, minor third is diatonic in this case because we are in a minor key. Now, let's talk about unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves. These intervals aren't labeled major or minor because they occur naturally in the same state in major and minor scales. Okay, and so they are called perfect intervals. You can alter these intervals, however, it becomes something else. We label it a different way. For instance, if you were to take our fourth and lower it a half step, we've learned from our enharmonic note studies that F flat is the same as E natural. So that would just become a major third. We can raise the fourth and lower the fifth, and that interval is a very special interval in the music world. It's called a tritone. We'll speak more on tritones a little bit later. But for right now, for our purposes, you just need to remember that octaves, fourths, fifths, and unison are all called perfect because they occur naturally within all kinds of scales, and when you alter them, they don't affect whether the scale is major or minor, especially in chords. Okay. So, how does this relate to solfege for vocalists or for reading music as instrumentalists? Well, the great thing about these intervals is that they sound the same no matter what key you're playing in. Just like do to mi will sound the same no matter what key you are singing in, a major third, which coincidentally is do to mi, will sound the same in any key that you play in. So for instance, if I make this pattern here in C major, do, mi, so, mi, do, and then I transpose it to, let's say, G. Do, mi, so, mi, do. The relationships between those intervals remain the same, and so thus will sound the same no matter what key you're playing in. And that's because of the composition of half steps. Okay, we know that a half step is the distance between any two immediately adjacent notes. So for instance, typically a white key and a black key on a piano. And we know that whole steps are two half steps put together. Okay? Each of these intervals has a set number of half steps. And I'm going to provide you with a chart just so you can kind of see how this works out. But by quick explanation, a major second is always two half steps away from the note that you're starting on. So if we go up one half step, C sharp, and our second half step is D, that's a major second. And that would be the same if our starting note was A, B flat, G flat, or E. It wouldn't matter. A major third is four half steps. So 1, 2, 3, 4. A perfect fourth is 5 half steps. A perfect fifth is 7. A major sixth is 9. A major seventh is 11. And a perfect octave is always 12. So again, no matter what key you're in, do to mi will always sound the same. They'll have the same relationship because it's a major third. Do to fa is a perfect fourth and will always sound the same. Now I'll do another video on the relationship between intervals and solfege for our singers, and then also a video on identifying visually these intervals. But for now, what you can take away from here is how to count and figure out the quality of intervals. So number one, you can start with your bass note. That's labeled as 1. Count up 2, 3, that's a third, 4, 5, that's a fifth. Okay? And to find the quality of the interval, you look at the key signature. In this case is C major. And E natural occurs naturally in C major, so we know it's a major third. And we know that G is a fifth away, so it can only ever be a perfect fifth. And we also know that the F would be a perfect fourth from C, that the unisons are perfect, and the octaves are perfect. Again, those are called diatonic intervals, intervals occurring naturally within a key. Review the chart that I've included with this lesson to better understand the relationship and to be able to kind of visually grasp how these things work.